In 2002, I was nearing the completion of my undergraduate degree in middle grades education, and my last semester was to be spent student teaching reading and math in a 5th grade class at a really small elementary school. I had no idea what I was in for. The school I was at was considered a failing school and has actually since been closed. Over 90% of the students at the school were on reduced or free lunches, and they were living below poverty level. And I remember thinking I was going to get in there and really make a difference and really facilitate learners by implementing all the creative techniques of content delivery that I had been learning in my courses. And although I feel like I did make an impression, it was not because I guided learners with incredibly creative and innovative lessons. No, it was because of what I learned from my lead teacher and the students I spent time with that made an impression on me. I was paired with a veteran teacher that had been teaching for over 30 years, and she was one of the last holdouts at this school. And most other teachers had been there just a few years, but my lead teacher, she was committed to her students, to providing them support, and although she planned to retire in the next few years, it was evident that she wasn't just biding her time. And actually, her husband had passed away the year before of a brain tumor, and she could have retired then, but she returned to continue her journey with the learners that she touched and touched her. The students in our class were challenging as a group and individually. Most were hard as nails because they knew what it was like to live hand to mouth, and one girl in particular will always weigh heavily on my mind, and I'll always wonder how she fared in her life. She was tiny for her age. She looked just like Punky Brewster, and for such a small girl, she had a low, gravelly voice, and she could put up a real fight really quickly about most anything. And at first, I was taken aback, but as I got to know her, I began to understand her more and her reason for fighting. She was constantly falling asleep in class, and one time I asked her why was she so tired, and she said, because those dogs were running in and out of my room all night. And I asked her how many, and she said 4. And I wasn't sure what to make of it, but I knew that her home life was challenging. She came to school pretty dirty most days. Her hair and her nails were real dirty and unkempt, and she wasn't very pleasant smelling. She didn't shower very often, and because she was so tiny and she had a hard time with clothes fitting her properly, and often she would come to school without underwear on, you can imagine what would happen if her pants slid down too low in the back. So I was constantly telling my mom about this girl, about her personality, about the fact that she was really underprivileged but had such an incredible passion about her. And my mom, being the eternal humanitarian, went out and purchased 3 bags full of new clothes, including underwear and accessories for her. And I took them to the office the next day, and they gave them to her anonymously at the end of the day. And I'll never forget that next school day she came in with one of her outfits on and one of her new hairbands in, and you could tell she was on top of the world. And I told her how much I liked her new outfit, and she grinned ear to ear and told me that her mom bought her a bunch of new clothes. And during this whole experience, I just remember that I learned from my lead teacher how not to just sympathize for these students and for learners, not to pity them, but to participate and try to make a difference. Provide them structure at school, challenge them as they need to be challenged individually, develop ways to help them take ownership of their learning, and when you can, help them personally and sometimes even anonymously. And one last point that I want to make is that this lead teacher, she sat and ate and talked to her students every day during lunch, while the other teachers sat at a teacher's table. My lead teacher sat with her students. She took interest in them, and she empowered them by telling her stories and listening to theirs. And I feel like this experience was not just a professional lesson, but a life lesson for me in bridging the gap between humans.